6 skydivers perform different formations. They perform a more complex formation, when suddenly one of the skydivers knocks one of the other skydivers, who peels away from the group and pulls his parachute. Tragically, the skydiver's parachute does not execute completely, and part of the parachute scrunches up on one end. The skydiver falls to his demise. He lays on the ground. His altimeter shudders, and the needle moves on its own. After that, an unknown man leans down and removes his altimeter from him. 10 years later, Sarah, a young skydiver, dives alone and does dance moves. She is clearly talented and very experienced. When she lands, a skydiver named Payson compliments her on her landing. Sarah seems a bit standoffish towards him. Payson asks if she liked her solo diving, in a slightly mocking manner, and then comments that it's much more fun in a group. He propositions her to meet the other fellow skydivers who he dives with, but she refuses. Payson reluctantly accepts her decision, but clearly wishes she would change her mind. Sarah goes back to packing up her gear, and then jumps suddenly as a man comes up beside her. He dumps something down, and asks if she has finished with the equipment. Sarah says yes quietly, and when he walks away, asks the other skydiver who he is. The skydiver next to her says that his name is Chris, and he has been packing parachutes for a long time, but he doesn't jump anymore. It's clear that Sarah is slightly disturbed by him. Meanwhile, Payson and the other skydivers discuss Sarah. Peyton's ex Lisa, who is jealous of Payson's attention on Sarah, asks them why he wants her to skydive with. What's so special about her? Evan, a member of the team, pipes up by saying that skydiving runs in Sarah's blood. As Sarah is putting something into the boot of her car, Payson tries again to get her to join their team to jump with them, trying flattery. He says he no talent when he sees it. They exchange a few quick-witted quips back and forth, but Sarah does not change her mind. As one final attempt, he asks her if she will come to church on Sunday, and Sarah says what self-respecting girl wouldn't come to church. Sarah visits her mother, who she has not seen in a while. It is apparent from their discussion that her mother does not like her skydiving, and that there is a drift between them. Church was just a pseudonym for skydiving from a cliff. This is Sarah's first introduction to Payson's team, and they are there to take turns free-falling from the cliff and pulling their chutes. But before they do, Evan says to Sarah that he heard she might be joining them for formation jumps the next day. Sarah is guarded. She says she knows nothing about it, and that she has never done formation jumps before. Wade laughs incredulously and asks her what she actually does. Is she just the princess of the sky, all by herself? The others laugh. She responds by saying that she prefers to dive by herself and has always done that. Lisa smirks. Payson brings up that now, since they have 6 skydivers, they can do the hex. The mention of this formation brings an eerie silence from everyone. Before they take their jump, Sarah listens in the background. In a concerned voice, Evan talks about his hesitancy to do the hex formation. Payson, in annoyance, can't believe that Evan believes the superstitious stories surrounding the hex formation. Something is rather ominous about the thought of attempting it, and we will soon find out why. Lisa's interest is piqued, so she asks Payson what the hex is. He says to her that it is a jump he has always wanted to do, but it requires 6 talented divers. He asks her one more time if she will join, and she finally agrees. The day before the hex, the team all fold their chutes, ready to go up into their plane. Evan makes conversation with Sarah and tells her that it's true that it's a formation that requires 6 divers. However, the reason it is called the hex is because a few people have died trying to do it. Sarah's eyes widen for a second. She's starting to feel a little wary. She asks if he is being serious, and Wade reassures her it's just an urban legend and that no one has died doing the hex. Next, Payson shows the team a simulation of the hex formation. They all become pumped and excited and are ready to go. While up in the plane, Payson explains to one of the members who is concerned about his altimeter. It looks like it is playing up, but Payson is unconcerned, as it does it sometimes, but then corrects itself. Lisa voices her concerns with Payson choosing Sarah to be in the middle position for the hex, when she has never dived a formation before. Payson shrugs off her concerns, and they get ready to fly out of the plane. They each dive down and begin forming their positions for the hex with Sarah in the middle, but when they begin the flip part of the hex, Sarah loses control. This causes the team to lose their formation altogether. Disappointed, they all spread out, pull their chutes, and land. Payson puts his altimeter down on the ground back at jump base, and the altimeter shoots out a force field or anomaly of some kind. Sarah is walking out of the liquor store. Wade is holding a case of beer, and Sarah is clearly embarrassed that she messed the jump up. As she lifts the boot of her car, she receives a text message at which she rolls her eyes. Curious, Wade asks who it is, and Sarah tells him it is her mother. She always checks in with her after a jump and asks if Sarah is alive, and if Sarah doesn't reply within hours, she assumes the worst. Wade asks if her mom lost someone to a skydiving accident, to which Sarah says something like that. It is becoming obvious that her father died in the skydiving incident at the beginning of the story, and it seems like he too had the strange altimeter. Wade asks if that is the reason why she jumps alone, and she says it's a part of the reason. The next stop, why the team assembles to get ready to try the hex again. They all seem very tense and unsettled as they reach altitude. This time the skydivers together successfully pull off the hex, and they shout upside down in triumph. They are all excited, until suddenly Payson vanishes mid-air, right in front of them. They all begin to freak out and ask if any of them saw that. They realize they need to break apart to deploy their parachutes and tell each other to spread apart. After landing, they panic and ask each other if any of them saw him. They tell one of the senior jump instructors what happened, but he does not believe them. He says Payson probably had to cut away early and is somewhere on the side of the road packing his chute away. Everyone agrees and attempt to ease their panic. They all work together to look for him, and Sarah and Greg drive in her car to go look for possible places he could have landed. In the car, Greg is going over what he thinks might have happened because he can't logically explain him vanishing like that. After the whole day searching for Payson without success, they call it a night. The jump instructor tells them even the police found nothing and are waiting inside to question everyone. They want to see Sarah first. Sarah is questioned accusatorily about what happened, and the policeman mockingly suggests that aliens abducted Payson in the middle of his skydive. Sarah is angry with the policeman's attitude. The policeman explains why he is so skeptical. He shows her photos of their dive, and Payson is not in any of the videos whatsoever. Tired and drained after such an emotional day, Sarah returns to her place. She texts her mom to let her know she is alive, and then touches a photo of her father. She has a flashback of a happy memory with her father as a little girl. Wade wakes up to a voice saying, "Wake up." He gets up to go to the toilet. He has fallen asleep drunk outside on the jump base. After coming back from the toilets, he gets the fright of his life when he sees an apparition of Payson with a bloodied face. Payson is yelling, "Get out." Terrified, Wade screams out, but then Payson is gone. Meanwhile, Sarah has one of her reoccurring nightmares of a faulty parachute, and she bolts upright, horrified. Sarah then hears the same voice. This time, it says hurry. She hears a bang downstairs, so she goes to investigate. She is disturbed to find that the microwave is whizzing, cracking, and sparking. It somehow turned itself on. Sarah is now completely alarmed when she hears someone banging on her sliding door. She turns to see Payson with his bloodied face, yelling at her to open the door. She runs to his aid, but then he disappears. Morning arrives at the jump base, and Sarah is determined to tell the others. Lisa says she is crazy, but then Wade tells his story of seeing Payson as well. Lisa doesn't believe them both, until Wade throws Payson's altimeter on the table. It is without a doubt his. Lisa yells at Wade, asking him why he has it, and Greg said Payson had it on him for his jump the day before. He even notices that Payson's altimeter was stuck on 0. It's all too much for Lisa to hear, and she takes off in anger and refuses to jump for the day. The team head out for a jump, and the pilot is surprised that they would want to jump today. The atmosphere is tense between them all. Evan decides to drop a bombshell on the rest of them by telling them that he too had seen Payson, and Payson said, "You're next." Evan says this as he looks straight at Wade. Wade swallows hard, becoming extremely nervous. They all decide to fly solo and jump out. Sarah dives for a few seconds before she realizes that Evan is unconscious. She screams and dives over to him, desperately shaking him to try to wake him up. He doesn't respond, so she deploys his parachute. He is still unresponsive, and Sarah tries to tell him he needs to wake up to steer his parachute, worried he will land with broken bones. He doesn't, so she follows him as closely as she can, and then runs over to him once she lands. She yells his name, becoming increasingly hysterical, and then starts CPR. Suddenly, Payson's face flashes over his in a few seconds and shocks her so greatly that she moves away and stops CPR. Greg and Wade come to take over the CPR, but it is useless. Evan is gone. After emergency services are called to investigate, Greg sits beside Sarah on some steps. He lets her know that Evan's death was deemed a cardiac arrest mid-air, and that he most likely died even before he landed. Sarah is so surprised and asks Greg how long he has been diving, and if he had ever seen that. He says no and agrees that it seems so unlikely. Greg goes back with Sarah to her place, where they talk a little. Greg becomes sad about Evan and Payson. Sarah kisses him, and they get intimate. Sarah wakes up suddenly, because she hears something downstairs again. She walks down the stairs cautiously, and notices the front door is open. When she gets to the bottom of the stairs, she walks forward to the front door and it slams shut on its own. Before Sarah can react to that, she hears blood-curdling yelling and screaming from up the stairs, where Greg is. She runs up the stairs to help Greg, but when she gets to the top, the doors shut, and she cannot open them. All she can do is stand there helpless, while she hears Greg yelling out in agony. Weird flashing lights and zaps appear to come from beneath the bottom of the door. All sounds, including Greg, cease instantly, and the door promptly swings open to reveal Greg's bloody body lying on the bed. Sarah is horrified. She shrieks and screams in distress. She is met by the same policeman. He questions her about the events, and is even more suspicious, now that she has been the center of now 3 deaths. Sarah becomes angry with the policeman, and he leaves. Lisa suddenly bursts into her place, accusing her of being evil. She thinks something is not right about her, because everyone was fine before she turned up. Wade is reluctant to side with Lisa, because he knows there is something paranormal going on. Lisa turns on him too. She can't believe he's defending Sarah and storms out of her place. Later on, Sarah meets for drinks with Wade, Chris, and the pilot. They all discuss the hex. Chris nonchalantly says that he doesn't know a single living person that did it. Everyone who has done it has passed away. The pilot agrees, but Payson told him not to say anything because he didn't believe it and it would mess the jump up. Sarah asks why he didn't tell them, and he says they wouldn't have believed or listened anyway. Sarah leaves the bar suddenly. She wants to find out if they are cursed or not, and Wade follows. Sarah goes to her mother's yoga studio and shop and tells her what has happened. She asks for her mom's help, and she guides Sarah and Wade into a meditative state. Sarah receives a vision of their second jump. Instead of the turbulence hitting and then Ingrid sitting back down, the jolt turns into an emergency, and the plane begins to descend. Payson is running up to the pilot and yelling at him to open the door. This is the same thing Sarah heard Payson say when she saw him for a second at her sliding door at her house the night of his disappearance. Sarah wakes up with Wade and her mother peering down at her. They explain she went into a type of seizure. Her mother then asks her what she saw. When Sarah tells her mother that it was of the day they did the hex, but it was different because something went wrong with the plane, her mother gets a stricken look on her face. She tells Sarah it's been a long time since she had heard anyone speak of the hex. When Sarah's father did it, it wasn't called that. It was only named that after the other unexplained deaths. Sarah can't believe what she is hearing, and Wade is beside himself with anxiety over this revelation. They ask her mother what they should do, but their mother says she wishes she knew. She explains that all but one of her father's skydive crew passed away in weird and unexplained occurrences. Wade and Sarah sit down beside the jump plane. Wade says he feels bad for Lisa and thinks they should all stick together. Sarah agrees, so they both go and check up on Lisa, who is not happy to see Sarah again. Sarah tells Liz she thinks the plane was meant to crash that day because of the hex. Lisa doesn't like what she is hearing. Extremely irritated, she thanks them for their concern and tells them to go. Wade begs her to go with them, saying she shouldn't have to deal with what's happened by herself. Lisa is emotional and tells them to go. After they leave, Lisa turns her heavy metal music back up, sits down on her lounge, and goes to light a cigarette when suddenly all her power goes off. She hears a voice say her name repeatedly. Lisa becomes frightened and doesn't know what to do, and something turns her gas oven on. Lisa covers her ears to stop the voice calling her, and yells out to whatever it is to leave her alone. Without warning, all the strange sounds leave, her lights turn back on, and her heavy metal resumes playing. Weary or perhaps desperate to soothe herself, she decides to go ahead with lighting the cigarette. Meanwhile, Sarah and Wade are almost to the car when Sarah looks up at Lisa's apartment window. She sees a bloody Payson standing at the windows, and he closes the blinds. Sarah's mouth opens in horror, and the whole apartment explodes into a gulf of flames. Lisa had blown herself up unwittingly because something or someone had turned on and left on her gas stove. Sarah is questioned by the sheriff again, and is told she cannot leave town because she is a person of interest. The sheriff is deeply suspicious of all the strange unexplained deaths of her skydiving friends. When Wade picks her up, he tells her he has discovered something. He shows Sarah a photo he took from the wall of the bar. It's a photo of her father and his skydiving friends. He asks her if any of them look familiar. Sarah is astonished because yes, she does recognize someone, Chris. Sarah and Wade head over to Chris's camper on the jump base to confront him about what they've discovered. He asks them why they have come. He doesn't like visitors. Sarah explains that they know he did the hex, and they need to talk about it. He tells them to come in and sit. Sarah wants to know how he survived the hex. Wade wants to know why he didn't warn them or try to stop them. Chris beats around the bush, but essentially tells them that he summoned help from the demon of the air, Lean-to-Throw. He showed Chris how he could use the hex to take what he wanted. Chris created the hex, and that is how he survived it. It gave him limitless chances, and he could cheat death, but anyone else that did the hex, their lives belonged to him. They became a sacrifice to this demon of the air. Lean-to-Throw not only took their lives but their abilities. Chris coldly recounts how thrilled he was that he was given so many chances. He doesn't care about what Wade and Sarah are going through, from the loss of their friends and their own lives being in danger. In a sudden rage, Wade jumps at Chris. They both fall out of the caravan. Chris falls to the ground, and Wade punches him in the face several times. Sarah pulls him off of him. Chris sits up against his caravan with a bloody nose, and explains it was only meant to be one jump in an effort to defend himself, but then rumors got started about the hex and other teams wanted to try it. Wade marches back and forth trying to process everything, and is extremely worked up. Sarah asks him if he is responsible for her father's death. Wade tells Sarah to get out of the way, and she sees he has Chris's shotgun in his hand. He says he will kill him, and then the hex will end. Sarah pleads Chris to answer the question. Chris simply says her father was a good man, and didn't deserve what happened to him. Wade raises the shotgun again and goes to pull the trigger when shockingly, Wade is sliced through the head with a large piece of what looks like plane wreck shrapnel. Sarah screams in horror. Falling to the ground, she cries and screams. Chris calls her name, leans down to her, and says to her loudly, "Open the door." Sarah finds herself back on the plane the day of the hex, but the plane is crashing. She tries to open the door, then wakes up suddenly. She wakes up inside Chris's caravan, laying down on the lounge. He asks Sarah where she was, and she explains she was on the plane before they did the hex. She tells him she thinks the plane was meant to crash, but Chris leans in closer to her and grabs her arms. He tells her it wasn't meant to crash, but that it is crashing right at this moment. He goes on to explain this is how the hex works. She is not where she thinks she is or when she thinks she is. She is in a between world from when she knows she is going to die, until she actually passes away. He says there is a way to stop it if she will listen to him. He asks if she has Payson's altimeter. She shakes her head yes, and runs to go and get the altimeter. Sarah desperately tries to stay focused. While she switches between this world and the event of the plane crash, she runs to Andy the pilot and tells him that she needs to jump. It's the only way to stop the hex. He looks at her, puzzled, and says he hopes she knows what she's doing. While up in the plane, Sarah falls in and out of the plane crash reality. Looking down on Payson's altimeter, she sees that it is jumping around, giving different readings. She keeps switching reality until she remains back in the plane crash. Payson is calling out to her to jump. The pilot Andy is slumped over, and the plane is bursting into flames. She jumps and deploys her parachute, but it doesn't work properly. She spins uncontrollably until she manages to deploy her second chute, and it works. She cries with relief and finally lands. She screams out in anguish and exhaustion. Payson walks over, not believing she is alive. She yells at him that he has absolutely no idea, and in desperation asks what in the world is happening. To this, Payson smirks and says that she still doesn't know. She then remembers what Chris said. She isn't where she thinks she is, and will continue to slip until she is gone. She falls again, this time without the safety of her second parachute deployed. This time, she really is gone. Payson walks over and takes off the altimeter, and a black SUV pulls up and Chris gets out. The both look down at her. Chris says casually to Payson that he told her to jump with the altimeter to survive. Payson laughs and says she was gullible. They both joke about it, and Payson gives the altimeter back to Chris. He tells him it's not a toy, and they need to know how many lives they are working with. As they get back into the car, they laugh, telling each other they are going to hell. The registration plate on the car is called Skygod. Payson and Chris appear to be demons.